Hello, my name is Jimmy, and this is the 2023 Honda Pilot Trail Sport. This is the Canadian spec model, which slots just beneath the Touring as well as the Black Edition that we have here. You can kind of think of it as Subaru's Wilderness, but not on like the Outback or the Forester, but on the Ascent, a 3-row SUV. So let me tell you everything you need to know, starting with the looks. On the front end is where the rugged good looks start. On this fourth generation is very similar to the second generation Pilot because the first and the third were quite smoothed out. I mean, a lot of people said the third is basically a Honda Odyssey, but this looks much cleaner. And I actually really love the front end here. The LED headlamps, those look really good. The blacked out front grille is a Trail Sport exclusive. Those look great. You also get LED fog lights on the bottom. What you don't get here is any different bumper design. However, the approach angle is better than the other models simply due to the lifted ride height. There's actually a skid plate underneath with an integrated recovery point. However, being so low, if you're in mud, water, or anything like that, you're gonna have to go for a swim before you can actually attach that recovery point. I mean, it's still better than nothing, but it's not the most useful point. On the side of the Pilot is where we get these 18-inch Trail Sport exclusive wheels here. Those actually look pretty good, and they're wrapped in a Conti terrain contact, an actual AT tire, compared to previous generation, which looked like an AT tire, but really wasn't. You do get some blacked out pieces as it is a Trail Sport, like the mirrors here, the roof rails on top, as well as the door posts. And the door posts, you do get proximity door locks on the front doors, but sadly not on the rear. That's only for the upper end trims, which is a little bit of a miss, but at least when you do open the rear doors, they're decently wide to open, so you're able to get whoever you need in and out of that cabin with ease. Onto the back of the Pilot here. This is kind of where I feel the Pilot loses some of its character. There's not too much going on back here. Some may like that, some may not. You do get Pilot right across the center, combination LED tail lamps, Trail Sport badging on the bottom, and a Trail Sport exclusive is, well, you got this hitch on the bottom with the recovery points. It's not a bad looking machine by any ways, but I just feel like the back end doesn't really match the front in terms of those, well, rugged good looks. If we open up the trunk here, I do have to press the button on the Pilot here in the middle, or I can use the remote. Unfortunately, on the Trail Sport, you don't get the kick to open. But you get 19 cubic feet of space back here, which is actually quite decent. What I do like about this trunk space is you actually get a little bit more space underneath this false floor here. If you turn it around, it's essentially a plastic tray, so you can get it dirty and whatnot, and you can just wipe that clean rather than the carpet. And you can even put this down in the lower space here, and you get a little bit more trunk space. And at the lower space, I was able to fit in this full-size stroller within the cabin. No problems there, or even a set of golf clubs. Decent amount of space. We can also, of course, fold down the third row. That's relatively easy to do with these post straps here. And when you do, that expands up to 49 cubic feet. And if you want even more space, you can fold down the second row to get 87 cubic feet in total. Terrific use of space. You can camp in here if you like. But let's check out that third row. All right, getting access to the third row is actually quite easy. These second row seats, there's a button either on the top or on the side here where you can press and it'll fold forward so you can slide right in. In the third row, I'm 5'11" and there's plenty of headroom above me. Legroom is actually pretty good as well. The seats, they are lower than like the Honda Odyssey would be, but actually they're not bad. For a mid-size or large-ish size of SUV, actually very accommodating back here. On the side, I do have cup holders, 2 of them, and I even get a vent here, which is nice. The only thing is the Trail Sport, you get blanks on the side here where the USB ports would be. You only get that in the upper trim, so you just get a block-off plate here. And speaking of block-off plate, there's one right here. I mean, it looks like it should be a vent because it's about the same size as the vent down here, but I get a block-off plate. Just to show that I didn't work hard enough and I got a block-off plate rather than whatever function it actually should be. But, I mean, honestly, back here, it's more than adequate. Yes, you can fit technically 3 people back here, but you got to be pretty small to do that. Not the most comfortable place to have 3 people. All right, the second row. I'm 5'11" and I still got more than enough headroom Legroom's pretty good as well, but I can make it better by sliding the seat all the way back, so I get a little bit more legroom here. Or if I, want to cater to whoever's back there, I can slide it all the way forward here as well. But who cares about people in the third row? Let's scooch all the way back. The seats themselves, they're not bad. They're actually heated, so it could be decently comfortable in here, even in the winter time. Sadly, not cooled seats. But you do get shades on the side, so you can block off the sun. And actually, the side material is not too bad because the armrest is actually nice and soft. And because it's captain seats, you have one here in the center as well. Unfortunately, this plastic is less than desired. Yeah, definitely a little bit of cheaper materials right on top here, but that's okay. No one really is feeling that area. You do get your own climate controls back here, a 115-volt outlet, as well as 2 USB ports in the center. And in the middle here, I like these pockets because you can store your regular stuff, but you can also have a little place for your phone. That's actually kind of smart. On upper trims, there's also another pocket up here, I think. But on here, because it's only a trail sport, well, that's all we get. If you're thinking about carrying child seats in here, I am a child passenger safety technician here in Canada, and I was able to put 4 seats into this vehicle. On the driver's side here, this is a Collect Ling infant seat. No issues getting that into the cabin. The cabin space is nice and wide, allowing me to easily put that seat into the vehicle itself. On the passenger side, this is the Collect Fifth, a rear-facing convertible, and once again, no issues with that. And even in front of that convertible, there's more than enough space for me at 5'11". In terms of the third row, I was able to put 2 seats in there, not 3 across. It's just not wide enough. On the passenger side, this is a Collect Flow. It is very, very bare, as I was actually taking all the fabrics off to swap it out with another one. But I just wanted to see how it would fit, and there's no problems with that. And also I have a Collect Ling here on the driver's side. The seats in the third row are not fully installed, but I did have them fully installed, and then I took it off because I was taking pictures and I forgot to do the video part. But they do fit in the third row. In terms of lower anchors, you have 3 sets in this vehicle, 1 on the driver's side, 1 on the passenger side in the second row. You actually get a third one on the passenger side as well, in the third row, which is actually quite cool. However, depending on the seat that you choose, you might not be able to use them too much anyways. In terms of upper anchors, there's 5 within the cabin, 2 behind these seats, and 3 behind the third row. But once again, not likely to be using all 3 at once, probably just the outside 2 or the middle one, because you can't fit 3 seats across. But let's move up to the front seats. All right, the front seats of the Pilot. The seat material is leatherette, so it's not real leather, but it actually feels pretty good, I would say. They are heated but not cooled. You can get cooled seats on the upper trims, but sadly not in here. I mean, I don't mind the seats, and there's quite a bit of adjustment on the driver's side as well. Unfortunately, it's only a 2-way lumbar support, not a 4-way, but I think for most people that's going to be okay. In front of me is your updated Honda steering wheel. It's very similar to like the newer Honda generations. You have all the buttons that you really need and paddle shifters on the back. The thing I would say is they are a little bit small, these little nubs in here. So depending on kind of how you use it, you might like start using the fingernail of your thumb rather than like the meat part of your thumb to control them. But that may vary depending on your hand size. I do like the stitching though. That's actually really nice. Behind, you get a split analog and digital cluster. Analog for your speedometer on the right, a digital cluster for your tach, and a bunch of other stuff on the left-hand side. This is like the HRV's cluster. Only on the upper trims do you get the full digital cluster. I mean, I guess it's fine. Not really much to complain about. It does show you what you need and a lot more. So it's okay. Sadly, no heads-up display unless you go, once again, to the upper trims. As for the infotainment, this is the 9-inch unit for basically most of the trims other than the base model, which gets a 7-inch unit. However, even at a 9-inch unit that we have here, in today's kind of tech world, it's kind of small. Most manufacturers are going with like a 10 or even 12-inch display. This just looks a little dinky. However, this cutout that they have for it, it definitely looks like they're ready to put the larger 12-inch screen that they have in their Accord in here. But at the time of launching, maybe it's, chip shortage or whatever it may be. They just didn't have the resources. So maybe next year we'll get an updated infotainment system. but it's the same one as a Civic. It works well. It has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Both are wireless. It's only on the 7-inch model that you do have to plug it in. And yeah, it's fine. It's a little laggy at times, but I think for most of the things that you'll be doing on it, it's more than acceptable. Really, there's not too much to complain about there. What I do like is the climate control. It's very, very ordinary, which you might say is a bad thing, but I love it because you have your typical dials on here. You get all the buttons that you would need, and everything is just easy to use. And I love the cabin for that reason. The shifter is very similar to the 9-speed that they have before. Even though this is a 10-speed, it's the same push button layout. You get your drive buttons on the side here, and a pretty large cubby in the middle. I mean, overall, this cabin space, it's quite nice. You get a bunch of cubbies and whatnot in here. In fact, there's 12 different cup holders in here. And I love just how much space there is. Like within the door cards, there's all of these cubbies in here. In front of the passenger space, you got a cubby here as well. There's just a lot of place that you can store stuff, which for a family SUV, it makes total sense because you're going to end up like putting everything within this cabin. Before we go for a drive though, let's talk a little bit about the powertrain because that's actually quite cool. It is a brand new 3.5 liter V6. It doesn't have VTEC anymore. It may sound like the previous J35 that we know and love, but it moves away from that single overhead cam and VTEC head to dual overhead cams instead. Power is a little bit better at 285 horsepower, but the same amount of torque at 262. Now what does all of that mean? Well, it's no faster than before. In fact, it's a little slower, and because it's also heavier, it uses a little bit more fuel as well. Because you lose VTEC, you don't get that glorious crossover sound of the previous generation. Now, these all might be kind of bad things at first. However, it's a Pilot. You're not drag racing anyone. So being a little bit slower, that shouldn't be, well, that big of a factor. Sure, it uses a little bit more fuel, but I mean, the last one wasn't great in real world scenarios anyways. I'm currently averaging 13 to 14 liters for 100 kilometers. That's just mostly city driving. Definitely not the worst, but not the best neither. For example, like the CX-90 that I had a couple weeks ago, that had great fuel efficiency with that 3.3 liter inline 6, and it's also turbocharged with more power. So not as efficient, not as well powerful as some of its competitors. What does stand out? It doesn't have to. That's the thing. It's a Pilot. It just has to be a very good all-arounder. And it is. Because around town, it's smooth. Maybe too smooth. Because the suspension is so soft. Well, it's not like it just bounces you around that much. The dampening actually still works pretty well. But it's so soft that if there's a little bit of a dip in a corner, the vehicle feels pretty unsettled, and you just don't want to take it that quick around corners. And of course, it doesn't help with the AT tires. It does have less grip as well. I also found that the brakes, they just don't have as much kind of power than some other manufacturers as well. Doing a harder stop, the tires, well, they just kind of let go. So just in the overall like grand scheme of things, on daily drives, on wet or dry pavement, it doesn't give the sense of like the security that you may want. But the all-wheel drive system, that actually is pretty cool. It's very, very similar to the super handling all-wheel drive. In fact, I'm pretty sure mechanically is identical as well. It's just the electronics behind it that's a little bit different. And what that means is it's able to push power not only between the front and the rear axles, it's also able to shift that power between the wheels on the axle in the rear. So if you're turning left, it's able to send more power to the outside wheel on the right, giving you a little bit more rotation. No, it doesn't like drift or anything like that for you. It's not that kind of system. But if you're punching it into a corner, you do feel like, well, it's able to turn a lot better than you might think this should do. I mean, if you're comparing to like the Palisade or the Telluride, the way that this turns, it actually feels pretty good. Not gonna lie though, the AT tires, honestly, it doesn't help it at all. So there's that. But the overall grand scheme of how it feels, it's decently agile. Other than the fact that it's very, very soft. But that's really it. Overall, I think this Pilot is actually a really good vehicle. It's solid through and through. And being like 80% good at everything, it doesn't have to like stand out saying, I'm the best at one factor. It really isn't. But it's just good in general. That's where the Pilot shines. And at 60,000, you might be thinking, well, it's a lot to pay for a vehicle that's just good. It's not the greatest. But where are you going to find a $60,000 vehicle that's just great overall? That's pretty hard to find, to be honest. I think there are a few things that it can be improved on. For example, I really would like a 360 camera in here. And also I would like to upgrade some of these trim pieces because there's quite a few of these scratchier plastics within the cabin that just kind of downplays the interior a little bit. But that's really it. In any case, thank you so much for watching this video. Like the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.